Hello again and welcome to another Mage Tower guide. This time we're going to be going over the Blood Deathknight. So as always, we're going to go over our consumables first. We're going to need Strength Flasks, Potions of Prolonged Power, Bear Tartar, and Drums of Fury or the Mountain. Either one doesn't matter, and if you want to, you can also use an Augment Rune. I didn't use one, but it can help. Moving on to the talents. Kind of a lot to be said here, to be honest. Blood Drinker's great, Rapid Decomposition's great, Ossuary's great. Red Thirst was a dead talent for me. I did use it, but honestly I would have loved to try out Tombstone. One of the hardest things about this fight was just trying to figure out the cooldown rotation for Annihilates 3 and 4. I found a way to deal with it obviously without Tombstone and with Red Thirst, but I think Tombstone does have a possibility of being used. You know, use your best judgment, see what works for you. The next one is Tremble Before Me, absolutely the best one on this tier. The ability for it to randomly sometimes interrupt Mind Rend and even Annihilate and Drain Life as well. It's just kind of useful to help delay some damage, and it's the only one in that tier that kind of does anything like that. Foul Bulwark is what I went with. I was also thinking about using Rune Tap for a while, but just having the passively having more health really helps when you're outside of the Death and Decay that Varus has, as you're able to just take more hits when you don't have anything to regenerate your health from. So that's the one that I used. I do think that Rune Tap does have a possibility of being used. Again, use your best judgment. That also would have been really helpful for, again, surviving those Annihilates 3 and 4. And then finally, our level 100 talent. So I used Bone Storm on this, and I mean, okay, so I used Bone Storm on this, but I used it one time, and I don't even necessarily feel like I needed to use it. I did use it, but I'm not sure if it was actually necessary when I used it. I kind of resolved the situation with another ability, as you'll see in the clip once we get to it, but I think Blood Mirror, again, just for the Annihilates 3 and 4 that I keep talking about, because as for me, that was the hardest part for this encounter, was just surviving past the third Annihilate. I think Blood Mirror could have helped me there, as well as I'm very interested to see what Purgatory does, how that interacts with the healing circles. Obviously, you'd be taking it all to the face, probably losing all of your health, but I wonder what would happen if you stepped into a healing circle after this. One of my major disappointments is that you can't go back to test some of these things, but maybe that's something that you can do as long as you're close to a healing circle. So I leave this one up to you. I would, if I could go back and do it again and had a gun to my head right now, I'd probably take Blood Mirror, just because again, Annihilates 3 and 4, I know I've said it like 6 times already, but those were the two things that actually made this take as many attempts as it did for me, was just having the damage reduction. So before we get to the actual kill video, we're going to go over the fight really quickly. So the first person you're going to be fighting is Inquisitor Varus, who has at his feet what looks like a Death and Decay. When you stand in this, you're going to take a stacking debuff that reduces your maximum health with each stack. So you're going to want to only take about 4 or 5 stacks of this unless you have a plan with dealing for more. He also has 2 abilities, Mind Rend, which does a burst of damage to you that gets more deadly the lower that your maximum health is, and just as well as your health in general. And he also has Drain Life. This is something that you're going to need to interrupt, but it's not the end of the world if he gets it off for maybe a second or 2, but it does need to be interrupted. The first ad that we're going to be seeing are these things called Tormenting Eyes that will pop up around the room. They have an ability called Inquisitive Stare that you are going to want to be facing if they actually start using this, so it'll kind of draw a line between you and the eye. Now if you want to actually kill these things, which I highly suggest you do, the only thing that it takes damage from is Blood Boil. Everything else it will just say immune, so these need to be killed with Blood Boil. The second type of ad we're going to be seeing are these ads called Nether Horrors. They're going to spawn in 4 corners of the room, and then they'll start running towards Velen if no one else is, if you haven't taken any aggro on them. So make sure you get aggro on at least one of them, and then they'll all come to you. Then they have an ability called Netherstorm. At this point, when they start channeling this, or they'll start casting it and then they'll channel it, they will stop moving and they will be in place there until they finish their channels. So if they get on top of Velen when they do this, you have to mass grip them off, otherwise they will destroy Velen and just completely rip them to shreds. So make sure that it's not on top of Velen. The next type of ad is called the Smoldering Infernals, and these are the ones that have the smash that just knocks you off the map. as well as a Fell Resonance is what I believe it's called, and which is just shown real quick in this clip here. As you see, it's just kind of pulsing out away from the Infernals in this green circle around the Infernals there. So all that this does is deal some damage, as well as it's taking away about 10% of its health with each time he does that. So you can really just ignore them and let them kill themselves until they get to about 20%, and then they take additional damage. Basically, you just want to cleave them down. There's never a reason to actually switch to the Infernals themselves. Moving on to Highlord Cruel. After you've killed Varus, he'll appear. This is where you're going to want to use your drums and your second potion. The first ability he's going to cast is Annihilate, and this is the big, the softer enrage basically. It will do a whole bunch of damage and put a debuff on you that will increase the damage of the next Annihilate to you. So that's the major thing we're going to be needing to use our cooldowns on. His next ability is called Twisted Reflection. This needs to be interrupted. If he gets it off on you, basically he'll put a dot on you that every time he hits you, he will recover 5% of his health. It's basically a wipe if he gets this on you. And then his third ability is Netherstorm, where he'll just jump to you and put a green puddle on the ground that does massive amounts of damage. So you'll need to get out of these ASAP. So that's pretty much the fight, and here is how I did it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is pre-pot. I'm going to use Empower Rune Weapon, and then I'm going to use Blood Boil and Morrowind. This gets me my full stacks of Morrowind, so I don't have to worry about that for a second. And then it just gets all of the dots on them from the Blood Boil as well. And then I'm just going to pump as much damage in as I can, interrupt the cast of Drain Life right here, and then go focus down this ad, and then wait for the Nether Horrors to appear. So here they come out. I'm going to just go ahead and stun them just to reduce some damage there, and start chopping away just on one of them, because then it'll bring the rest of them over. I'm going to pull Varus in, drop Death and Decay, and use Blood Boil. You want to be doing this pretty much every time the ads come out, is be pulling him to the ads, and then using Blood Boil to kind of get damage on everything. Here I'm just going to use the knockback to push myself back over to Varus. You can use the eyes as a way to move around the platform if you want to. It can be a little dangerous to do that, but I was having fun with this run. You'll also notice that the healing circles on the ground, I'm not really focusing on using them. And that's because you can kind of use them as a backup plan if you need them. But for the Blood Death Knight, compared to some of the other tanks, you really don't need to use them. You have so many different ways to recover your health. So I was basically just holding on to them. You can use them a little bit more freely in the Cruel phase, but in this phase I just didn't feel like there was ever a need to use them. So here I'm just going to focus on keeping the platform pretty stable with ads. I'm going to use that knockback to get over to here and get ready for these ads to come up. And as soon as they're up, and I get that one down, I'm going to pull Varus. And also, as a bonus, using Death Grip also can be useful for interrupting casts as well. So if you can hold off on pulling them, it also kind of helps just reduce the amount of damage you're taking over time. Gathering up these ads outside the circle. And at this point I felt like, I'm just going to wait for the next set of ads instead of worrying about it. Using Blood Drinker there. Anytime that you don't really know what to do and there isn't much up and you don't really want to go in on Varus yet, Blood Drinker is a good way to recover your health, which is why it's so useful. I'm going to wait for that cast a little bit, drop Death and Decay, Blood Boil, and then that's pretty much it and I'm getting out. You cannot withstand the Netherstorms, by the way, so don't even try. And you don't really want to waste anti-magic shield either. I'm just going to stun him right here. I'm going to finish up these ads, and as soon as I do, I'm just going to decide right here, I'm just going to go ahead and phase him and get him out of the way and start on Cruel. So this will be the last bit. This is where I'm going to use Hero and my second potion. And I haven't said this in my other guides, but the eyes no longer spawn in the Cruel phase. I guess you would have figured that out anyway, but you don't have to worry about those anymore. Everything else does stay the same. So for this first Annihilate, I'm just letting my Morrowind stacks handle it and interrupt the cast of Twisting Reflection. and now I'm just pulling the adds back to myself and away from Varus. So the first thing I'm going to do here is group them up, and you'll notice that I'm trying to get as much damage in on the adds, but I also want to make sure I'm moving Cruel constantly. One of the really annoying things that can happen is if you're not moving Cruel constantly, is that he will sometimes just crush Corvus. So in order to keep that from happening, or not, he won't crush him, but the adds will. So in order to keep that from happening, as soon as the adds start casting their channel, you want to make sure that you're moving Cruel away from the adds, unless you can kill them quickly. So here I'm just moving him a little bit. Now you saw right there that Corvus's health started dropping, and I just didn't want to take any chances. I went ahead and used the healing circle. That's the dreaded third Annihilate. I had 9% health. It was just barely enough. So honestly right there, if I had another cooldown, I would have used it there, but I need both Vampiric Blood and Icebound Fortitude to survive the fourth one, which I will get. And you know, if you have more gear, 916's pretty low in today's, you know, standings for gear. If you have higher gear, you might be able to just not worry about it as much, but for me, it was right on the cusp. So here's that last one. You'll see my health drop good amount, even with both of those cooldowns, but I was able to survive it there. Here I'm just, and that's pretty much it, actually. That's it. So I just barely got to 4. Maybe you can do it with 3. But yeah, that's pretty much the fight. Make good use of consumption. I didn't actually mention it when I was talking about it, but consumption is extremely good for recovering your health fast, especially when you can hit the adds and Cruel, or the adds and Varus in phase 1. But that's pretty much the fight. Again, it's up to you what you want to do with those cooldowns. I don't think Bone Storm is really that important, and I don't really think that Red Thirst is even remotely necessary, or usable for that matter. So play around with those. Let me know what you think. Like seriously, I would love to know which one you used, if not those two. Which one you thought was better? Because obviously my legendaries aren't making it too crazy, or my legendary singular didn't make it too crazy since I never used the on use. But yeah, that's pretty much the video. Let me know what you think about it. And I have the Brewmaster one done. That will be the next one coming out of the Mage Tower series that I have here. And then I also will be working on the Demon Hunter. Still don't have that at level cap. I'm working on getting that up, and I'm not really worried about legendaries at this point, so I'll try to do it pretty much as once it gets around 905-ish, 907, somewhere in that range, maybe 910, I'm not sure. Something that's easily done, but I'll be back with that one, and I'll also try to come up with some other videos as well. Really busy at work right now, so that's why the video times between releases have gotten a little bit longer in the last 2. But I'll try to keep it up as best as I can. But outside of that, that's pretty much it. And I will see you next time.